There comes a moment in life when motivation no longer feels like fire. It feels like weight. The excitement fades, the clarity blurs, and what once felt meaningful now feels distant. This is not the moment people talk about in success stories because it does not look inspiring from the outside. Yet this is often the most important phase of all, the phase where you learn who you are without momentum, without applause, and without guarantees. In this phase, effort becomes quiet. You wake up and move forward not because you feel driven, but because something deeper refuses to let you stop. There is no rush, no adrenaline, no dramatic turning point, just consistency in the absence of certainty. This is where discipline stops being a strategy and becomes a form of self-respect. Many people mistake this phase for failure. They assume that because motivation is gone, something must be wrong. But what is actually happening is maturation. The mind is no longer fueled by novelty. The ego is no longer rewarded by quick progress. What remains is commitment, stripped of excitement, honest and unglamorous. This is where most people turn back, not because they are incapable, but because they were never taught how to move without validation. They were taught to chase feeling, not to honor direction. They were taught to seek intensity, not endurance. So when intensity fades, they interpret it as a sign to stop. But growth was never meant to feel good all the time. Growth is often uncomfortable because it requires the death of old identities. The version of you that relied on excitement must dissolve so that a version built on steadiness can emerge. This transition feels like loss before it feels like strength. There will be days when your progress feels invisible, days when effort does not translate into results, days when you question whether anything you are doing actually matters. These days are not empty. They are teaching you patience, humility, and inner stability. They are building a foundation that cannot be rushed. You are learning how to stand without emotional certainty, how to move without external reassurance, how to trust yourself when the outcome is unclear. These skills do not look impressive on the surface, but they are what make you unshakable later. The world celebrates confidence, but confidence is fragile when it depends on outcomes. What you are building now is quieter and far more durable. It is the ability to continue without needing proof that everything will work out. It is the ability to act with integrity, even when motivation is absent. At some point, you will notice that you no longer react the way you used to. Challenges still arise, but they do not shake you as deeply. Doubt still appears, but it no longer controls your decisions. You are not numb, you are grounded. There is a difference. This grounding does not come from success. It comes from surviving uncertainty without abandoning yourself, from staying present through discomfort instead of escaping it, from choosing consistency when quitting would have been easier and socially acceptable. You begin to understand that motivation was never meant to carry you the entire way. It was meant to start the journey, not sustain it. What sustains you is alignment, knowing why you are moving, even when you do not feel inspired to move. There is a quiet confidence that emerges here, not the kind that announces itself, but the kind that no longer needs to prove anything. You stop explaining yourself as much. You stop chasing approval. You stop rushing timelines that were never yours to control. This phase teaches you discernment. You learn the difference between exhaustion and resistance, between rest and avoidance, between fear that warns and fear that lies. These distinctions are subtle, but they change everything. You will also confront your relationship with comparison. Watching others move faster, louder, and seemingly easier can trigger doubt. But speed is not depth. Visibility is not strength. Many people move quickly because they have not yet been forced to slow down and confront themselves. Your slower pace is not a weakness. It is refinement. You are learning to move with intention instead of impulse, with awareness instead of reaction. This kind of movement may not impress others, but it builds something solid within you. There's also grief in this phase. Grief for who you thought you would be by now. Grief for timelines that did not unfold as expected. Grief for versions of yourself that no longer fit. This grief is not regression, it is integration. You cannot move forward honestly without acknowledging what you are leaving behind. Strength that avoids grief becomes brittle. Strength that includes it becomes flexible. At some point, you will realize that you are no longer asking life to be easier. You are asking yourself to be steadier. This shift marks a turning point. You stop negotiating with discomfort and start cooperating with growth. Discipline becomes less about force and more about rhythm. You no longer push relentlessly. You pace yourself. You respect your limits without letting them define you. You learn sustainability instead of intensity. This is how long-term strength is built, not through bursts of motivation, but through systems of self-trust, through small promises kept consistently, through showing up even when no one notices. You may not feel proud yet. That comes later. Right now, what you are building is invisible, but invisible does not mean insignificant. Roots grow underground before anything appears above the surface. One day when pressure returns, and it will, you will notice something different. You will not panic the way you once did. You will not collapse into doubt. You will respond instead of react. That response will come from everything you are building now. This is why this phase matters so much. It is not preparing you for ease. It is preparing you for responsibility, for weight, for moments where others will look to you for steadiness because you have learned how to remain composed when conditions are unstable. You are not being delayed. You are being trained. The silence you are experiencing is not emptiness. It is instruction. The repetition is not stagnation. It is reinforcement. The uncertainty is not punishment. It is expansion. You do not need to feel powerful right now. You need to stay honest. You need to stay present. You need to stay consistent with what matters, even if the reason is no longer emotionally charged. Strength that lasts is built without drama, without spectacle, without shortcuts. It is built in moments like these, ordinary, heavy, quiet moments that ask you to choose yourself without reward. And one day, you will look back and realize that this was the phase where everything changed, not because something happened, but because you did not leave. You stayed, and staying is what made you strong.